Welcome to Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, if you hate cooking, if you have no idea how you feel about cooking because you've never tried it before, congratulations, you are in the right place. The place right now is my small apartment kitchen in Los Angeles. I am DC Pearson. I am a comedian, an author, and an enthusiastic home cook. And today we're going to do something that I'm really excited about, which is call my grandma Mary, and she is going to teach me her sauce recipe. This is a sauce that she makes, my stepmom makes, and I've been eating it for years, ever since they became a part of our family, and it's the best. And I've always kind of wanted to just know how to make it verbatim, and this podcast is a really good opportunity to do that. And it's also a good opportunity, since I can't really have guests right now, I was thinking, I can start reaching out to people that, wouldn't be able to come and be a guest on the podcast anyway, because in this case, they're 80-something and they live in Pittsburgh. So we're going to give her a call right now. When I talked to her earlier to kind of get this set up, she was in the middle of, she's been having back problems. She has a lot of health issues that she has struggled with on and off for many years, and she just never doesn't have energy. When I talked to my stepmom yesterday, she was like, I don't know. I mean, grandma's back has been bugging her right now, so she shouldn't really be doing anything. Or, I was saying, I couldn't get her on the phone. And she was like, yeah, she's been having back issues. And then when I called her earlier, she was in the middle of cooking what would seem to be a full Memorial Day spread to be sent to a family down the street, that's her in a nutshell. She just cooks and makes stuff and does things for people, and she is hilarious and wonderful, and I'm super excited to talk to her. So without further ado, let's give her a call.
This call is now being recorded.
Hello?
Hello.
All right, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, that's good. What are you doing right now?
Right now, I am just getting ready to talk to you
Ask
about
me
your
some questions?
thoughts. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm game for anything. Do you hear anything squeaking?
No, I don't hear anything on my end.
Oh, okay. It's this chair. I got it worn out from sitting on it too much.
No, we don't have any. I don't hear any chair squeak on this end.
So, okay, what are we doing here?
You are hopefully gonna tell me about your sauce recipe.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah, I got a pen and a paper and everything.
Okay, I'm ready to tell you. Now, this recipe is from your great-grandparents, which came from Italy, but they came from the northern Italy. So their sauce is really light. It is not a heavy sauce. The further down south in Italy, the sauce starts getting heavier and heavier and thicker. But up north, it's very thin. But what I do, and this is from their method of making spaghetti sauce, is I use a little bit of spare ribs and a little piece of pork or beef.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I brown that in a skillet. And then when I'm finished browning that, then I will take my, you have a little bit of oil, about a couple tablespoons of oil in a pan so that you can brown your meat. I never put raw meat in my sauce. So I brown it, and so that little bit of juice or the drainage from your beef, that's where I will take maybe a tablespoon of, usually if I have fresh garlic, I will put a couple cloves of fresh garlic on that pan, and I will take, or maybe a tablespoon of the crushed garlic. Then I take a small can of tomato paste, and always try to find the best tomato paste in tomatoes, because that's what makes a difference. So I take that paste, and I saute that with the garlic and the oil, the drainage in the pan. Scoop up all that flavoring, and then I transfer that to a large part where I have tomato sauce and crushed tomato with puree in it, because that will thicken your sauce. And when you're using the tomato paste, you don't want to use a heavy tomato, because the tomato paste will make your sauce thick. And like I said, from the northern part, the sauce is relatively thinner. But if you want to thicken it up, I would use crushed tomatoes with the puree in it and a can of puree, and mix that together. And along with your tomato paste, that will thicken your sauce. But then you start with your seasoning. You already have the garlic flavor because of the crushed garlic or the whole garlic pieces. And then you take that on, because your oil that was in that pan has absorbed that. And then what I do is your salt. I try to use sea salt. Of course, in their days, they didn't use the sea salt. They just used regular salt. Pepper. And I will use a couple stalks of celery, cut in little pieces, and quarters, so that you can take that out. And I always do a whole onion, because I don't want chopped onion in my sauce. I know a lot of people will take it and chop your onion up real fine. I prefer not to do that. I think if you're eating spaghetti sauce, I don't think you want to be biting into some chopped up onion. And then I use my basil. Basil was a must. And I use Italian seasoning. And I put that in. And if you like oregano, put a little bit of oregano in. And that just kind of gives it a little. But those are the three spices that we use and have always used. And, makes pretty good sauce, I think. My kids liked it. My kids liked it. Yeah. Because I'll put stuff in, and then I put my beef and my spare ribs in that sauce and let it simmer. And I know some people will simmer that sauce for hours, but I don't think you really need to. A couple hours is good, but it's real easy to do. And, or if you don't want to use the meat, then you could use, fry up your ground meat and put that in your sauce, and that's how they make your sauce with the ground meat that you'll find in restaurants a lot. Or you make your meatballs, and I always either fry my meatballs or I bake them, because you don't want any of that meat. You know what I'm talking about? The stuff that comes out of the beef. I don't like. I like my sauce very clear, so I don't put anything raw in my sauce, so that when I eat it, it's pure. It's pure Italian. And that's the way they did it. But, I don't, I like the thinner sauce. A lot of people like it real thick and heavy. But if you use your garlic, beforehand and then just take them and throw them out, and I put, with the whole tomato, the whole onion, I just put in my sauce, and when it's finished cooking, I take it, and that comes out, the celery comes out, and you have clear sauce. Now you're going to make that for me.
Now I am going to make it. Absolutely. And I'll send it UPS overnight.
Oh, that would be wonderful. You know what they say? That's like that one restaurant that I like to go to, because he's from the northern part of Italy, and his sauce is very light, and it's the best sauce that I have ever eaten in a restaurant. It is really good. So normally, when I can get down there, I get a couple quarts and I put it. I'm cheating. This grandma's cheating because I go out and I buy a couple quarts and I put it in my freezer. And when I want some, I have it, and then I just add whatever meat I want. But it's good eating.
What's the name of the restaurant?
1905.
All right. So if people are in Pittsburgh, they should go to 1905 and tell them Mary sent you.
But, so that's how we do the sauce.
Fantastic.
Just always remember the spices.
You got it. I'll let you go because I know that you've been on your feet and cooking all day, so it's time for me to get on my feet and start cooking a little bit here. And
what are you
I'll
making?
send you some pictures and what's that?
What are you making?
I'm making the sauce.
Oh, you're making the sauce.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go
That's why I wanted to ask you about it.
Go to it.
You got it. Love you, Grandma. I'll talk to you later.
See ya. Love you too,
Thank
honey.
you for everything. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, there you have it. I now have the sauce recipe. You now have the sauce recipe. We are going to keep it Northern Italian and keep it thin. I don't have exactly everything that she was talking about in terms of the different meats. I basically just have some Italian sausages that we're going to use. Yeah, I think we're just going to keep it simple once we make the sauce and do it on some spaghetti. Maybe do the sausages like on the side or something. And just have a nice Sunday meal and talk about grandmas. Before we get started, quick check of my ingredients. I have 2 28-ounce cans of crushed tomatoes, some tomato paste, the Cento double concentrated brand. As she said, you want to get good tomato paste, and I really like this brand because A, it's super Italian feeling, and then also it comes in a tube. So you don't have that thing where you open it and use a little bit of it and then you put the can back in the fridge and it eventually goes bad. Even though I think if you do have it in a can but you don't use the whole thing, you can freeze it. I do not, unfortunately, have any kind of like whole pork or spare ribs or anything like that, or any beef. I just have hot Italian sausage. And so we're going to use that for our meat, and that should also infuse a nice spice level. I have some celery that actually is going to be perfect for using in the sauce because I used some of it for a recipe, I think maybe the red beans and rice that I made last week, and the rest of it is kind of hanging out in the fridge. I was going to use some of it for stock, probably still will, but at least one stalk of it is going to get used for sauce, which is great because it's looking a little worse for wear. some fresh basil. In terms of herbs, we didn't have actual dried Italian seasoning. I thought we did, but it may have been tossed at some point for being super old. So I looked up an Italian seasoning blend online, and basically sounds like it's mostly dried oregano, dried marjoram, dried thyme, dried basil, dried rosemary, and dried sage. So I mixed the ones of those that I wasn't already planning on using just by themselves, i.e. oregano, and then the fresh basil that I'm going to be using. So what I had, we didn't have marjoram, but have some dried rosemary, dried sage, and dried thyme, just a little pinch of each, dried oregano, and then garlic and a whole onion. And I think that is it. So first up, I'm gonna brown these sausages in a pan with a little bit of olive oil. I thought it was interesting that she said she likes to brown her meat in a more shallow pan, and kind of makes sense to me. Like, I feel like you would get a better browning on the meat if in a lower sided pan because there's better evaporation. So let's do it like that. Why not? I think you could also, if you wanted to not get more stuff dirty, you could just as easily brown your meat in the pot that you're ultimately going to cook the sauce in. But feels like we're doing it. It's Sunday, we're hanging out, it's grandma style, so we're going to do it per grandma directions. So I've got my pan on, put a little splash of olive oil in there. Get that warm over medium heat. Another nice thing about this recipe, I'm realizing not a whole lot of stuff to cut up. I have some already pre-peeled garlic that we've been working our way through, and so I'm gonna bruise several of those cloves, just kind of crush them with the flat side of a knife before I put them in, and I'm also going to cut this onion in half before I put it in the sauce and take the peel off, but that's kind of it, I think, for chopping stuff up. That is the sound of the sausages going into the pan. I guess it's been kind of a sausage-heavy show these past few weeks. They're just great to have around, and especially if they're pre-cooked. These are pre-cooked. You know, they last a really long time in the fridge, which has been great for right now. Just bruised my garlic with the side of a knife. And I feel like on a Sunday, the fantasy is really eating around like 5. Never quite get there, but trying to get this sauce on the table as quickly as possible. It's just nice to eat on the early side. I think if you decide to make this or something like this, or if I make it in the future, I might actually err on the side of browning the meat in the same pot that you're going to ultimately make the rest of your sauce in. Even though you might not get as good or as quick of browning, I feel like I just want to make sure that I'm getting all of the brown stuff up from the bottom of the pan and getting it over to the other pot that I'm going to make the sauce in. And I'm not sure exactly yet how I'm going to do that. So it wouldn't be as much of a concern as I was doing if I was doing them all in the same pot. But again, we're going for Grandma Mary realness here. So I'm observing the letter of the law in this case. Downside of these being pre-cooked, I'm not getting as nice of a browning as I would have liked. Maybe they just haven't been in long enough, but it's just not having exactly the same quality as I would necessarily like to see. Oh, okay, I take that back. I just flipped one over and it was looking pretty good. Might just be a patience thing. All right, I've flipped the sausages. They're now browning on the other side, quite loudly, I might add. And once they're looking about where I want them to be, I'm going to lower the heat just for a second and set them aside. In this case, I'm going to put them, just to save a plate, I'm going to put them in the same pot that I will ultimately make my sauce in. I'll let the oil cool off a bit, because I don't want the garlic to scorch when I throw it in. All right, wooden spoon at the ready. I'm going to throw in this garlic into the oil and kind of using the wooden spoon to scrape up some of the ground sausagey bits. And I'm going to do a trick that I learned from Chris Bianco's cookbook, Phoenix's Own. And I'm going to tilt the pan a little bit so all the oil goes into one corner. And then just carefully, I'm going to hold that part of it over the heat. And that kind of, I think it just more quickly infuses the oil with the garlic. But you want to be really careful when you're doing it because it involves tilting hot oil. It's kind of satisfying. It all goes into one corner and then you just sort of see it bubble. And in this case, since we're going to be discarding the garlic, I'm going to let it go for a while. I don't want it to get burned, but definitely nicely golden brown and kind of give up as much of its garlicky flavor as we can. All right, and then I'm going to carefully fish these garlic cloves out. They're looking nice and fried. Then I'm going to squeeze in like a tablespoon, maybe a couple tablespoons of tomato paste into the now garlicless oil. I'm just going to kind of saute that around and sort of until it changes color a little bit, takes on like a deeper red, stirring it around in the oil, just trying to get as much up from the bottom of the pan. Tomato paste is such a great ingredient, even if you're not making something that's really tomatoey, just bringing that depth and kind of savoriness, umami. And again, we're stirring it around in this oil because then it's going to deepen and change the flavor of the tomato paste and also infuse its tomato pastiness in this oil that's about to go into the sauce. It already has the garlic flavor in it. And we didn't get a ton of, this is something else that I'm a little bit disappointed about from the pre-cooked sausages being our meat component here. Didn't get a ton of sort of excess fat or juice coming off. So it's mostly still that original oil. There's not a ton of it. All right, the tomato paste is getting really dark brown, so I'm feeling good about putting this into the pot where I'm ultimately going to cook everything. And I'm also going to, partially just to clean the pan out and partially to make sure we're not missing out any flavor, I'm going to deglaze my pan with just a splash of red wine. Oh yeah, that's working nicely to pull up any remaining little sausagey bits. All right, now I take my pot that already has my sausages in it, put it on my main burner. Actually, before I add my crushed tomatoes, I'm gonna turn my heat on under my pot here, and I'm gonna add my spices and just kind of let them bloom a little bit in the oil and any little bit of fat that I'm getting from these sausages. Just stir them around a little bit. Kind of wake up the dried spice. And again, infuse it in the oil. Oregano, some of that Italian seasoning. I'm not going crazy, just hints. Stirring those around a little bit. And now I'm going to add my crushed canned tomatoes. Dropping in 2 stalks of celery. Could cut them into quarters if they won't fit. I'm going to drop in 2 onion halves. And my fresh basil. I'm going to do a lot of it, and I'm going to turn the heat up and bring it to a boil. And then lower it to a nice simmer. And that's about it. We're going to let it go for 2 hours. And on the side, I'm probably going to make just a little salad of some chopped up cucumbers and some chopped up tomatoes with some olive oil and vinegar and salt and pepper. It's kind of one of the first things I ever learned how to make. I feel like my dad would make it a lot to go on the side of pasta stuff, and it's great. It's kind of fresh, and I really like it. And we have a cucumber that is on the edge. So that's what's happening. All right, I'll talk to you in a couple hours. All right, it's been about 2 hours and the sauce is looking pretty cooked down. I maybe will admit it might be a little more cooked down than its namesake intended, but it's looking really good and kind of dark red. I'm just going to go ahead and fish the aromatics out of it, and At the same time, I am going to put on a pot of water for spaghetti. If you've ever heard the show before, you kind of know how I'm planning to do it. I'm just going to make the spaghetti for a few minutes less than directed on the package, so it's still quite, even harder than al dente, completely not finished by the time I mix it in another pan with some sauce, and then I'm going to add in some pasta water and kind of finish it there in the sauce and serve it with my little cucumber and tomato salad. And this amount that I have right here of the sauce has got to be at least probably 6 servings, I would say, depending on how you use it. I'm probably going to use like a third of it to go with the spaghetti, but I'll kind of feel it out. Maybe more like a half. It cooked down quite a bit, but it's going to get rehydrated with a lot of the pasta water and thin out, and then kind of hopefully get cooked into the spaghetti when I do them all together. And you know what? I'm going to throw a little knob of butter in there as well. Oops, almost forgot about the sausage. I'm of course going to fish that out as well, and probably serve that on the side or on top of the pasta. You can also probably, if you're using sausage, you could cut it up and stir it through the sauce. But at home, I feel like when we have this sauce, you probably are getting the meats basically I think served just on the side on another platter or something like that, and you can kind of serve yourself. Could be mixed in with the sauce. You could even chop them up and mix them into the sauce if you wanted to. Really, the world is your oyster. This is your chance now to carry on the grandma legacy. You are becoming the grandma. Make it what you will. Something very interesting and unexpected that just happened is I was fishing out the aromatics, the onion, the celery, basically anything whole that's in there. And I was realizing, there's a lot of sauce still on this stuff. And let me go ahead and just taste it, just to sort of get a sense of where the sauce is at the moment. And then I ended up eating all of the limp, completely desiccated, I think that means dried, so they weren't desiccated, they were super saturated, but limp basil leaves that I had fished out of there, covered in the sauce, and it was phenomenal. You can do that. Don't let anyone tell you you can't. All right, my water has come to a boil. Gonna drop the pasta in there for about 5-6 minutes, I think. All right, pasta's looking about where I want it. I'm gonna drain it into a colander, but first I'm gonna save some of that pasta water. Got my pasta back in the now empty pot. Gonna add in some sauce, some pasta water, a little knob of butter, and let it finish cooking and incorporating. Stirred my pasta around, knob of butter is all dissolved. Gonna turn the heat way down and taste for texture, seasoning, etc. Oh wow, you know what I just realized? I never did salt and pepper in the sauce. I was like, it's a little under seasoned. That would be why. It actually has a decent amount of salt in it, I think from the canned tomatoes and the fact that it cooked down quite a bit. It's not completely unseasoned, or I think I would have noticed it back when I was just eating whole thingies of basil. But I'm gonna add that now. How about that? Definitely can't pin that on my grandma. I remember her saying salt and pepper. I wrote it down, did the whole thing. Just ultimately got so caught up in the beautiful simplicity of it, I think I tried to oversimplify, i.e. forgetting the main thing I know about cooking, which is salt and pepper. Salt in particular. Okay, gonna taste again. Yes, okay, much better. And I ultimately decided to just do a little cucumber salad. Something about the tomatoes and the tomato sauce was feeling a little redundant to me. All right, now I'm just going to tip the spaghetti onto 2 plates, add a sausage to each, bring out the salads, and we'll be good to go.
One, two, 3. Oh, ding, ding, ding.
Which one is that?
That's the New Radicals.
Oh, that's right. So wake up, kids. We've got the dreamer's disease. Isn't that what he says? In it? Wake up, kids. Yeah. So there you go. Haley Hepworth. Joining me once again. Comedian. Dining companion. Quarantine companion. Person I'm married to. You have in front of you spaghetti a la Grandma Mary. Old red sauce Italian.
Oh man, I don't think I've ever had spaghetti served with a big hunkin' sausage on top, and I'm stoked.
All right, let's eat. Oh yeah, and we have cucumber salad on the side. It was going to be cucumber and tomato salad, but I figured we already had tomato represented somewhere.
Fair enough.
See if you can find it.
Okay. In the wine?
Yes. First reactions to the meal.
I mean, it's great. It's great. Which, from smelling it all day, I had a hunch it might be. But just seeing it and smelling it before we even started eating, I feel like it gave me that weird, like, deep gut, satisfying, comforting sensation.
Oh, good. I realized it just sort of was a coincidence that we ended up doing this on a Sunday, but because it's quarantine and time is meaningless now. But I did enjoy this sort of Sunday-ness of it all and thinking like, oh, we're going to have a real kind of like Sunday dinner and it's still light outside, which is important to me, feeling like it's that kind of thing, even though it's not super early. And I did enjoy that aspect of it and just it being on the stove for a while. It wasn't on all day, and that was by decree of the grandma in question. She said a lot of people leave it on all day, but I don't think you need to do more than 2 hours really. So I said in my head, sweet, because we want to be eating in like 2 hours. So I took her at her word with that, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. I had a similar feeling, and I even said when we were eating it, I have to separate myself from the podcast of it all and just really enjoy this because it is a style of food that I just really enjoy. And also I think this particular recipe does have a lot of kind of sense memory-ish qualities for me, just in terms of my grandma or Lori, my stepmom, making this or this kind of thing. And then, or that often it being a like element at a larger holiday meal or something where it's like, oh, okay, also here's just some shells and cheese, like in this sauce or whatever. That is just to me, like, I remember like in high school and then in college coming home and visiting, and them, it would sort of be like, whether it was my grandma visiting or whether it's like just Lori at home, it's like, there's always something in the fridge or the freezer that's in this sauce.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think this sauce was present when I first met Grandma Mary. I think we showed up in Phoenix and she was there already and had been there. And I think we got in really late the first time I ever met her. We were probably driving and got in after most people were in bed, maybe. But she was up in the kitchen and, whipped a ton of little Tupperwares out of the fridge.
Yeah,
she had a bunch of options for us, get a little of everything. It was great.
I do feel like also this particular combination, we're drinking a little red wine with it. I feel like that definitely to me reminds me of coming in the first night. There's something in the fridge that's in this sauce or in the freezer that can be easily heated up. Maybe a glass of wine, whatever. You're sort of feeling a little bit out of sorts because you've been driving for 6 hours or flying or what have you. And it is truly something that is good like any time of day. If you wake up the next day and you have it for lunch, you're super excited. That's just like having, and I'm just very happy to kind of like officially have possession of the wisdom now, because it's more than a dish. You know what I mean? It's just like a sauce that you can do so many different things with.
Totally.
That I love.
Yeah.
It's neat.
No.
It's a very kind of, I sort of ask, oftentimes we'll ask on the show, like, if the guest had any Ratatouille moments. And for me, this is like a big, it's a bigger Ratatouille moment, even though it's very simple. I mean, it's not like hyper specific or weird. There's no out of left field, but I use a little bit of this. And I didn't think there would be, but I just love it.
Yeah, no, it's classic. It's delicious. It's great. Even just looking at it before we ate, you can tell that it's like, oh yeah, the sauce is like perfectly coating all the noodles. It just looks so good. I have never had spaghetti with a sausage, and I think that's genius. It's so much easier, I think, probably than making meatballs, but it really scratches that same itch. Our classic spaghetti that my mom would make when we were growing up, she would do with like a little bit of ground beef and onion in there and everything. And it's just so good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that sausage is a great way of capturing that same savory, meaty spaghettis and meatballs type of sensation.
Oh, neat. Yeah. In this case, it was just it was the only sort of meat we had to do in the sauce to give it the flavor.
So that's a you invention?
It's not a me invention. It's definitely grandma.
Not invention, but
no. Grandma and Lori would do, like, Grandma said when I was on the phone with her today. Grandma Mary was like, I usually do like spare ribs and like a little bit of, if I have like, I know, right? She's like, I do like some spare ribs, or if I might, if I have, just some pork or some beef or just different, cuts of meat.
Bits and bobs.
Bibs and bobs, big time.
And ends. Yum.
But they would also do it with hot Italian sausage. My grandma would not smuggle, everybody knew she had it, but like bring onto the plane sausages, like not like in her carry-on from this one place in Pittsburgh that was really good. And they had like hot or sweet as they will. And I feel like she would usually get the hot, and they're very good. But they would do sausages in the sauce like this, where you sort of, it's not really meant to be like, this is going to be the best sausage you ever had. It's just like, no, this was in the sauce or whatever the meat is. It's going to be a little bit like almost, either tough or stringy or broken down or whatever, because it's been an element
it's
in
served
the sauce.
a greater
Exactly.
purpose.
Yeah, precisely.
It's zapped of some of its life force, but because it spent it feeding us.
Exactly. But also it's been replaced with, as much as it's put out, has been replaced with just like red sauciness. Yeah, exactly. But I remember that, now that you mention it, I do remember that Margaret style spaghetti sauce. I feel like that was one of the first things that you kind of cooked in our relationship, or that we cooked like together.
I think I made it a lot when we were watching The Sopranos early in our relationship, is being like, which this now seems, I mean, in quarantine, it doesn't seem crazy, but it does seem weird to think like, oh man, we just had like free Saturdays to be like, let's watch 4 episodes of The Sopranos.
Starting at 2 p.m. when we wake up.
Yeah. God, what a lifestyle. But that would be, I think I made that Margaret spaghetti a lot at that time. I love this spaghetti. That will obviously always be my personal comfort spaghetti.
It's so good, and it's so different too.
Yeah.
It's very different than this. It's like ground beef, onion.
And she would like, sauce. I feel like brown those off in a pan a little bit, get the flavors going, and then, add the sauce to it and just easy, delicious.
It's so good. And it's so easy. I would say
it's like really balanced and yummy.
If there's somebody listening, if you don't have a way you make spaghetti, just make it like that. It's so good. Just like chop up some onions, brown them in some, cook them down in some oil, add the ground beef, get the, fat and the oil and stuff in there. Add pureed tomatoes or tomato sauce or whatever, jarred sauce, anything. It's so good. Yeah. It's really good.
That is, I think, simple. A staple we would have constantly. Though I feel like I can't remember the last time I've had spaghetti before this, and it's so good.
What do you mean?
That you and I have had spaghetti before this. Like recently. I feel
like
we
haven't
hasn't
had exactly this. We definitely had spaghetti as a noodle.
Yeah, but I mean the classic red sauce spaghetti.
Yeah, we haven't. I think now that you mention it, growing up, our canonical family spaghetti was also like ground beef, onion, some red sauce. I think.
I mean, it's so good.
It's really, really good. It's really good. It feels
not
like
too complicated,
exactly.
not too much going on. I feel like at some point we have a family friend, this wonderful guy who's a wonderful cook, Mike Hoffman, and he would have us over and make this really good bolognese. Ooh. So I feel like at some point my mom would also verge into doing a bolognese that's a little more complicated, and just a few more elements going on that was also extremely good. But man, it's hard to beat just that simple classic spaghetti.
I agree. And I've wanted to venture into bolognese world. Lori, my stepmom, will talk about like my dad had a very canonical, not to use the word canonical twice in the same podcast, that's especially one that's not about Star Trek or comic books.
Well, now you have to find a place to use it 3 times.
Or else I'll turn into a pumpkin?
Yep.
Oh man, sucks. Or no, just for the
I
rule
could
of
live
threes.
with it.
But he apparently made a very good bolognese. She doesn't know where it is or exactly what the recipe was, but now she's like, I've had it at restaurants, I've had it whatever, but nothing will ever be as good as that. Which on the one hand, I'm like, that's beautiful. And then on the other hand, I'm like, I can beat him.
That is, I mean, the Mike Hoffman bolognese that I think my mom would make as well, then I have to imagine off of his recipe because I feel like it was very similar. I mean, that's the one I think of. It's so good.
I might have to call him on the show now that that's an avenue that I've opened up.
He'd be great.
Oh, that would be really cool. Okay, I'll do it. That's a great idea. Thanks.
He also has a really good, that is different from mine, puttanesca that he does with tuna. That my brother Mark, I was talking to him recently and he was saying, I like your puttanesca because I think I made it over the holidays. But he's saying, I like this. When I do it, I do the Mike version with tuna. That's just it's a different animal, but also extremely good.
I don't think I've ever had that version of puttanesca. Obviously, your puttanesca, as we've discussed on this show, is one of my favorite things that I eat. I
would say I feel like the tuna version that I've had I don't think I've had it when my brother has made it, but when Mike has made it, it's more of a like you're having people over puttanesca. Sure, it's a little more classed up. Whereas I feel like the one I make is kind of a just, fuck around. We don't have much time on a Friday night, but we still want to eat something delicious, which I also love.
And I think, not to take anything away from Mike's puttanesca that I have not had and I'm eager to have and
it's really good.
Very, is intriguing to me. I think yours might be closer to the original spirit of puttanesca. That's not to say it's better or worse, but because I do think puttanesca is meant to be you just have stuff in the pantry and you're throwing it together.
Yeah.
And I think there might be weird misogynistic connotations to the name
it's for
or something.
Single women where it's you don't have a home, you just have a sad little pantry, so you come home late at night after walking the streets as a single woman or whatever, and all you have are things in tins because I guess you don't.
In this world, single woman is synonymous with just prostitute.
Yeah. Where I guess it's you don't have a fridge, you just have a pantry because you're probably just renting a room.
Right.
I don't know. This is all again extrapolated from I feel like a Nigella article about it that I read probably 6 years ago. But
I'll buy it. So in keeping with the theme of the show, I was wondering, do you have any particular grandma food memories for either of your grandmas or any other grandmas that you've run across in your course of life?
I mean, certainly the number one grandma in my life is my grandma, Paula Rant, shout out. She's wonderful. And I think we really grew up with her, or she lived 10 minutes away from our house growing up, and I think helped my parents a lot with childcare stuff when we were younger. So she was around a ton, and she's a great cook. The main thing that I think of at this point in my life with her as far as food, I mean, there are several things I think of, but the main one is Christmas cookies, where every year before Christmas, she has kind of a tradition where we go to her house, we make these traditional cookies, and she's already prepped everything before we've gotten there. So she's made the dough
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because I know that it's a big deal.
Yes.
And I've taken you to it or picked you up from it at various times. And this is the kind of the centerpiece or a centerpiece, one of the showpieces of your holiday
the
season.
Christmas season.
Yes.
Yeah. No, she has me and my sister Grace and our cousin Rachel, and we go over. And I will say, I think part of the reason that she preps everything in advance is because the specific doughs that we're using need chill time.
Don't we all?
So it's then just like an assembly line of cranking out hundreds of cookies that then are divided pretty much just between our two households of our household and our cousins, the Rants. And they're fantastic. But that's, I feel like, the number one food association that I have with her. She does the staples. There's some rotating cast members in the lineup of cookies every year, but I would say the staples are Dainties, which are kind of a shortbread almond cookie that they're in like a solid log. I tried to make them once years ago without her and I couldn't do it. It was too dry and I couldn't get the dough to stick together. It was too crumbly because you have to form it into a log and then chill it and then you slice it off in little slices. They're very small, but they're super rich and very flavorful and delicious. And you bake them and they get a little browned. And then when they're warm out of the oven, you roll them in a cinnamon sugar mixture. They're sensational. And then the other main...
Big time agree with that.
Oh,
assessment.
they're so good.
They don't, that's the thing is they don't have a ton of like curb appeal.
Yeah, no, they're little
You know
brown
what I mean?
cookies.
They're just little and they're a disc and they're covered in cinnamon sugar, but you have them and they're like the hobbits of cookies where easy to underestimate. Haley is scowling at me. They are like the hobbits of cookies. Everybody underestimates hobbits, but in the end, they save the world. And
I'm not as familiar with hobbits
season.
and their reputation, I guess, as underdogs. I don't know.
You thought they were the jocks of Middle Earth?
No, I just haven't spent enough time with them. I don't know their deal.
Got it.
I don't
Watch
know their
more
mythology.
Hobbit movies. The Dainties are big. Why do you think it didn't work for you?
I think at this point, I mean, when I tried to make them, I really had not done much baking. And I was going off of the recipe that she gave me. I think it's a hard dough because I think the only like fat or binding agent in it is butter. And I probably just didn't have enough butter, or maybe my butter was the wrong temperature, so it wasn't integrating the way that it should have been. I'm sure that I just didn't get it integrated correctly, but it is a really hard type of cookie dough to make also, where it's not ever moist. I don't think there are eggs in it. I think like usually the things that you have in a cookie dough that help it have a wetter, stickier, more cohesive sort of property, I don't think they're in that dough. I think it's just butter and then a bunch of dry stuff. And so you have to get it. Basically, it's like, it's never wet. It's like a crumble. You make essentially a crumble, and then you have to form those crumbs into a log and get them to stick together. I bet I could do it now. Now I really want to try because I am just much more seasoned at cookie baking and working with various different types of doughs. But man, at the time, I tried to do it when I was house sitting for our friends Dan and Maggie years ago when I had just moved here. And yeah, it was just kind of crumbly. It was just falling apart. And then you chill the dough for hours so it is solid enough to slice. I got to give them another go. But they're such a Christmas cookie to me that it feels weird to make them any other time of year.
That makes sense. It also, I guess it makes sense that they're called Dainties if the texture of them the entire time you're making it is fallible.
Yeah. No.
Where it's just like, then you get to the end and they're super dainty.
Yeah, when you have them, they're rich, but they're light and they're crunch. They have a perfect little texture. They're buttery, but not overwhelmingly so. They have more nuttiness and flavor than just like a shortbread. They're great.
They are great.
They're so good.
Yeah, they're like a super duper, not dense, extremely light shortbread.
Yeah.
So those are the Dainties.
Those are the dainties.
That's one of the gang.
Yes,
Christmas
I would say
cookie
the other big heavy hitter that we have always made are Pixies, which are, I think now I've come to know, it's like, oh, they're a like crinkle cookie,
Right.
where they're kind of on the other end of the
spectrum.
spectrum.
Slap some swear words in front of either of these, and they're roller derby team names.
Yeah. But that dough is like so sticky and doughy and soft, and it's more of a batter. So again, you have to like freeze it or chill it so that it's solid enough to work with. And it's chocolate. It's like a rich, sticky, fudgy, chocolatey sort of batter that then you roll them into balls and you roll them in a little powdered sugar and bake them, and they just kind of puff up and have this perfectly little white crinkly coating over the dark chocolate cookie. They're puffy, and again, they're light. They're so good. So those are the main ones. I think in more recent years she's integrated like more of a simple almond cookie, just like really good, where she has these really pretty, she loves glass, like colored glass and antique glass.
She is, we should say, the main character from The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams, living in Idaho under an assumed name.
Wow. I mean, God, if we really want to get into it.
So she loves glass.
She loves glass. She gave us a really great little sugar bowl that I love, that I use it every single day to put a little sugar in my coffee. But she has these little glass cups that have a design on the bottom of them that's kind of like a star or like a snowflake looking thing. And so you make this really soft almond dough. And by you, I mean she makes it before we get there again, probably days before. And then you roll them into a ball, coat them in a little sugar, and then you flatten them with the bottom of that cup that has the design carved into it. So then they have a perfect little stamp on top of them. And those are great. Those have been around for a long time. I mean, my mom really loves almond. I really love almond as well. But I think that's probably why she does them. Or I think she's mentioned that that's why she's integrated them into the primary lineup, is because Margaret loves almond.
Do you think there's any world where Paula is leaving out like one key ingredient or step from the recipe to be like, you can't cut me out of this? It's like a poison pill thing or something where it's like, I don't think that's what poison pill means, but like in some like espionage movie where there's some hacker that's like, you can't fire me, or I don't know, the dam will break or something.
The secret dies with me and you'll never solve the big case. I mean, maybe.
The dainty case.
I wouldn't put it past her. She's pretty crafty.
Yeah, I would. Words that I would use with your grandma: devious,
cunning,
Machiavellian. We're laughing, we should say, because it's not true.
No, she's so sweet. She's wonderful. No, I'm sure I just executed it wrong. I think it's I'm sure it's a difficult dough to pull off. And I think she's just so good at it because she's done it forever and she has a very deft hand with it. That when I tried it, I just wasn't ready, And
those things are so great, though, to have those things that are like in the family that at this point are like in your grandma's hands. Like she probably doesn't have to consult her little 3x5 card every year to remember exactly what the ratios are.
Oh, I'm sure she doesn't. But it's very sweet. She wrote out the recipes for dainties and pixies on a little 3x5 index card for me and my sister and my cousin a couple years ago and gave them to us for Christmas, which was very nice. To have those recipes in her handwriting and get to have them is very sweet and exciting.
It's so cool.
I know.
And to think that used to be like how all recipes were distributed, right? Just on handwritten on cards for people.
Yeah, I think my dad's sister Janet made him, I believe he said like when he went to college maybe, that she made him a recipe book where she wrote out a bunch of their family recipes and their mom's recipes and stuff. That is so sweet. She's another great cook and great pastry cook. She makes a really good, absolutely legendary banana cream pie. But there's something so sweet about that and so nice. My friend Lauren Hamilton gave me I think when I went to college, she gave me a recipe book it was mostly blank, but she had written in a couple of her favorite recipes in it. And for years I used it and would write when I came upon a new recipe that I liked, I would write it into that book. Now we cook so much that I haven't been practicing that as much, but it's really, there's something very nice about it.
Totally. I think my equivalent of that isn't nearly as good and is in no way as romantic is just a folder in my email labeled recipes that anytime I send myself, I have it some thing where it's like pre-programmed to be like when I send myself an email with something with like recipe in the subject line, it just automatically goes into that folder, or if it finds it in there. So sometimes things will be mislabeled because it'll be some like, I don't know, Huffington Post email that's like Donald Trump thinks he has the recipe for fascism or whatever. So there's a couple strays in there, but I will occasionally go back and be like, oh, that recipe, that thing that we had 3-4 years ago that was really good, that we were eating a lot at the time. And oftentimes, but not always, it will be in that folder.
That's great. There are plenty of recipes that have slipped through my fingers that I can't find anymore, but I remember them now. Or I was thinking about the rockfish that you made, the first thing that you made for me that is so good, thinking like, oh, we haven't had that in probably years at this point, but it was such a staple in our rotation for a couple years there. I'd love to have it again.
I could do that one from memory.
From memory, I think I could too.
Yeah. I think it was a red onion chopped, sauteed in butter, and then until the onion starts to lose color, and then just like pre-packaged like succotash, like you could use like a frozen...
We would get it at Trader Joe's because it would be corn edamame and red bell pepper.
That's right. And you could also...
And then there's sage.
Yes.
And thyme,
yes.
I believe.
So yeah.
And cream.
Yes, heavy cream at the end. And then the rockfish is just salt and paprika.
Yeah.
And then you top it. Parsley. Mm-hmm. It was good. It was really good.
Yeah.
Different textures. Mm-hmm. Creaminess.
Yeah,
it's great.
the lightness
it's a good
of the
one.
fish with the richness of the succotash.
But I think one of the things that would probably make it a tough Google is the original recipe is snapper.
Right. We always use rockfish.
I think I maybe just asked the guy at the store, like, do you have snapper? And he was like, no. I was like, what's like it? And he was like, this is, which is great because rockfish is cheap.
And really good.
I think it's like one of those fish that they just find in like trash canals or something. And it's great.
Works for me.
Absolutely.
That's Paula is my main grandma touchstone because she's my only grandma. And she makes a lot of good stuff. She makes Norwegian lefse every year that we have for Christmas. There's a lot of very established traditional. I can't tell you what is specific about it because I think it's always changing, but I can tell you the specific taste of she loves to put together a lunch spread with like sandwiches and a little pickle and a little that's always different, but it feels so distinctive to me. She's great. You have a lot more grandmas to draw from.
I do. I wanted to say before we move on, I have had lunch over at Paula's house, and it's so great. It's such a comforting, nice, it's like lunch as real meal, which right now, especially in quarantine, where a lot of people are still at home and you're trying to, if you have, and you have food and you're lucky and it's fantastic, and we're grateful for it. But I do find lunch to be a little bit of a tougher meal because you're just thinking about dinner and then you're like, wait, I have to eat this other meal. What should I have? And this is really, Paula really like lunch is like a,
yeah, she kills it.
It's a little simple art form. I do have more grandmas to draw from. I have I don't mean to brag, but as of this recording, knock on wood, I have 3 living grandmas, which is great. I used to have 4 at one point.
An embarrassment of riches.
Exactly, precisely. My mom's mom, Anne, is no longer living, but I have my dad's mom, Jan, my dad's stepmom, Pat, my stepmom's mom, Mary, who we heard from earlier in the show, and they're all fantastic. They're all very different.
They really are.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You have a rich and balanced, varied
Grandma
spread.
smorgasbord.
Yeah.
So Mary, who we heard from earlier, lives in Pittsburgh, is very Pittsburgh Italian, loves watching golf on TV, which is like a very late in life development for her. She cooks for everybody in the neighborhood, seemingly, and worked for many years, worked in various corporate jobs. I think in many cases, like kind of before that was just something that you definitely did. It's like having a 2-income household was not necessarily a foregone conclusion. And she's really neat. She's a really neat lady. And as we heard, Pat, my grandma, my dad's stepmom, lives in Arizona, as does my grandma Jan. And Pat is a really neat woman who married my grandpa in the 60s. It was, I think, both of their second marriage. And she's super neat and smart. Similarly, always worked, I think. And similarly in kind of corporate-y jobs. I think her and my grandpa, as we learned when we went to interview them a few years ago, partied a lot in like the 60s. There's a lot of images of them in like, we have a bowling team and we're all wearing uniforms. And my grandma would show them to us and be like, this was like 3 pitchers of martinis deep. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, she pivoted and went into like health food and started a health food store in their small northern Arizona town with a friend of hers, and started a like kind of hippie granola-y co-op for like health foods and stuff. And she used to let me think that I was like setting up her computer for her, which was really sweet. So I would just hang out in their health food store and be like, this place is really cool. And they're serving like college kids that seem really neat. And she's a really super neat lady. That's the running theme for all these grandmas. And when I think of her and food, I think of restaurants. Like there's a story in my family, speaking of red sauce Italian food, that the first restaurant I ever went to was Riazzi's, R.I.P. I was presented there as a newborn to Pat, my grandma, and Don, my grandpa, and I think some other extended family members, like fresh out of the hospital. It was my first restaurant experience. Riazzi's recently closed. It was a really great, again, sort of like American Italian place. Guys, hashtag reopen Riazzi's. What are we doing? It was so good. Speaking of recipes, I would love to have, if anybody's out there and wants to leak, and if any like disgruntled heirs to the Riazzi's recipes are out there, please leak them to me. And we would always, when we went up to visit them, go to Mexican food, and they had like a very regimented going out to eat schedule, and they would eat at home too. I think my grandpa cooked quite a bit, and Pat cooked as well, and they would cook some stuff and they would entertain a ton. Like they would host all the family parties and stuff. But in later years, my grandpa was like, I'm not cooking anymore. And so I think my grandma was holding most of that up. And I talked to her on the phone recently, and she was telling me about this enchilada that she really likes to make in the microwave these days for lunch. And she was like, I forgot that you could just have that, but I just remembered that you can just make an enchilada in the microwave, and it's great. I love it. And it's really neat and sweet. And then Jan, my dad's mom, biological mom, is also a super neat lady. She was a judge for many years, like would do, I think just like, I don't want to get it wrong, but I like remember sitting in on hearings. And there was one time where she literally sent a guy home because he was wearing too much cologne. And she was like, I can't breathe. You have to leave because you're wearing too much cologne. And she is a really well-educated, cool, smart, very funny person. I was talking to her on the phone the other week. I think a lot of this was happening around Mother's Day when I was doing like the circuit of grandma calls. And she was telling me about her sister who she had just spoken to. She was saying like, her sister is getting older. I think it's her older sister and is in like a assisted living facility. What did she say? She was just like, we just talk and laugh and tell lies, which I thought was such a funny way to put it. And I do particularly associate with the holiday of Thanksgiving. because we would often have Thanksgiving either at her house. She used to live in Tucson, and then she moved in with my aunt and uncle in a kind of like mother-in-law house behind their house in kind of North Phoenix. And she had this little teeny tiny house. And when we would go over there for Thanksgiving, my aunt and uncle would have like most of the stuff set out inside the house. They would be cooking some stuff in there and sides and things, but she would be cooking like the turkey and a few other main things in her little teeny tiny house. So I just remember like going in, and she's kind of, which I really relate to now having entertained more, where you just go in and she's sort of like, oh, hey, how is everyone? And you can tell she's a little bit like, fuck off. I'm trying to finish the turkey. But also still being a very nice host. And one day a few years ago, I got to, I think after I had really started cooking, I was like, can I do anything to help? And she let me snap some beans. And I thought that was pretty sweet. And yeah, she's great.
She's hosted us several times out here in LA when she's come out to house sit for someone and had us over for a dinner. And it's been fantastic every time.
Yes, she is a very close friend of hers. Her niece, I want to say, is a really cool like neurosurgeon out here and is like coveted by all the universities. And whenever she talks about it, it's just super impressive. So they would get to stay, these like two older ladies on the go with their Shiba Inus. They both had like a Shiba Inu each, and one of them only had one eye. So we would go over to these like really neat houses that they would be house sitting. And yeah, they would make like a whole spread, and Jan would have made some cool like pasta thing and some chicken and great, just light, fresh, really good,
delicious
stuff.
Summer evening, eating out on the patio. Just ideal.
Oh, so fun. And I was talking to her recently, and she is still getting a like farmer's market box, but they have a system where you go and you put your number in the window of your car and you can safely get it dropped off in your trunk. And so she, like us, gets a very well-intentioned big thing of vegetables, and then all week is like, oh, what am I gonna do with this kohlrabi? Oh no, I forgot about it.
I feel like I have a memory before I ever met her. I think really before we were dating, when you had maybe told me about her and you sent me an email, you forwarded me an email from her, which I guess is flirting. Jesus.
Forwarding you an email from my grandma. Yeah, that's classic. That's in that book, The Game.
Where there was just a very funny email. She is super funny. Basically just, I think it was pretty short, kind of just explaining like, so we have these chickens and this rooster gets me up every morning.
Yes, so I should explain, my aunt started raising chickens in their backyard. So the chicken coop is right next to, or was right next to, my grandma's little house.
Gotcha. Yeah, but basically just kind of being like, I have this rooster alarm clock every morning that was driving me nuts. So the other morning I just chopped its head off and solved that problem.
That's right. And I think my dad's take on it was, well, she's an Iowa farm girl. Like, she can just do that. That's what she grew up doing. And it's meaningless to her. And it's no, well, back to sleep, which was so funny.
Yeah.
And
God sealed the deal. I was, clearly like, I'm in. I gotta, if for no other reason than get me closer in proximity to this cool lady.
And those
she
genes, the chicken killing genes, she really does. She 1,000,000% gets it done. We love these grandmas, don't we, folks? No, I don't know. I just I guess in this episode, everybody hopefully has been connecting more with their family members or reaching out or whatever. And I just think it's cool. And I think like food is so inherently linked to, for a lot of people, is linked to sort of like grandmas, for lack of a better word, or it's a shorthand that just like grandma used to make or whatever that gets thrown around for.
Yeah, it's like it's tradition, it's memory, it's family, and yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to just take a beat. Mostly just wanted to lock that recipe down. And also, if there are people out there where you're like, I don't have a family sauce recipe, this could be it now for you. It's public domain. by all means, invent a story. Also, she said, people listening will have heard it, but she said that it's from northern Italy, from like, you know, my great grandparents. And she was like, as you go further south, the sauce gets heavier and heavier. So this is a very light sauce.
It is. I was noticing. Yeah, it wasn't heavy at all. It was really bright and very acidic and light and delicious.
Which is, I never really thought of it in exactly that way, but I do think about eating her or Lori's food for the first time and being like, I mean, obviously it's something that will have like spare ribs and stuff in it. So it's not, you know, a kale salad.
Light.
But comparatively, I do remember feeling like, compared to other stuff that I've had, maybe sort of my dad's like spaghetti, whatever, with meat sauce, like, oh, there's something about this that's kind of like acidic and sharp and bright, even though it is also very satisfying. And I think it's cool. I like it. I'm really excited to have it now officially and to know how to make it. And it was so easy where she said, when I talked to her earlier today, she's like, I got to refresh my memory. But then when I was talking to her, it was like, I mean, it's not like she's looking at a sheet of paper or anything. And when she's telling it to you, it does come across as like, you can do this, or you can do this. I like to do this. At this point, you could do this or this. I like to do this. So it is really more of that, like,
it's a practice.
It's a practice or a process or a ritual as opposed to a recipe. And it's really neat. And also that hearing that directly from her mouth makes me more confident that it's like, okay, if I wanted to take this now and sort of like, okay, I'm going to do this instead of this, or like I did the sausage, even though they definitely would do sausage. She didn't mention it, but they definitely would.
You can tinker without it being sacrilege.
Exactly. Because it is that's the nature of the thing. And that's what's cool about it. So I guess just all that to say, we celebrate these grandmas.
Absolutely. We celebrate these grandmas. A great bunch of grandmas.
Absolutely. Long may they run, and long may they cook for everyone on the street despite their back problems. And yeah, that about does it. That is it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you so much to my grandma Mary for appearing on the show. That was super cool. I was thrilled that worked out and that she was able to come on and that we were able to, that I was able to kind of share a little bit of her with you guys because she is neat, and I'm super duper grateful that she is in my life. Shout out to all of the grandmas nationwide, all of the unofficial and non-biologically related grandmas as well. We celebrate them. Anyway. Anyway, I'm DC Pearson on Twitter, or at DEECEE Pearson on Instagram, because I joined in 2019 and all the good names were taken. If you want to follow Haley Hepworth, she is at Haley Hepworth everywhere that matters. My interstitial music is by Advance Bass, the amazing Owen Ashworth. The intro song is July 4th, 2004 by Jason Anderson. My cover art is by Sarah Beacon. That's Becan. I have written a couple of novels, The Boy Who Couldn't Sleep and Never Had To, and Crap Kingdom. Please support your local bookstore in whatever form they exist right now. And if you like hearing me talk, I read the audiobook of both of them. Those are available on Audible. Those are available on Audible or wherever fine audiobooks are distributed. Also potentially free at your local library. And also, if you enjoy the show, please rate it and subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps more people find the show, and that helps there be more of the show. That's all for now. Have a great week, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.
You know, so many people don't have a roof over their head. You know, and you turn around and you look and you say, okay. Well, no complaints. You got a roof over your head. You're still eating. You're still able to cook for half the neighborhood. You know, but I like doing that.